So what a pleasure and an honor to meet you. And by the way, Charles is fine for me. I don't need to be
Okay.
not a formal guy. So just let's start off. I'd like to get to know you a little bit. Could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, your family?
Okay, real good. Well, here again, my apologies for not being ready today. Today is one of those days where it was just a lot of unexpected challenges came up. So we're still a little bit in the middle of that. But here, muy bien, Charles. Here, I'm a Chicano, born in 1950 here in Ventura County, and so I grew up, Chicano experience in a small town, Santa Paula, and in a lot of ways, I was very fortunate as a youngster, with a dialogue with my tia, with my auntie. I really connected with my life purpose, to make the world better. So from the time I was 8 years old, that was my vision. I'm going to make the world better. And at that point, make the world better was be a good son. Kind of like my mama was immigrante. I was the oldest of four. My dad pretty much had to work on the road. So in a lot of ways, it was to be a good son. And that was my purpose until I discovered the Chicano movement when I was around 15. And that was, I want to see justice for my community. In a lot of ways, as a youngster, you don't have the words to understand that you're experiencing racism, that your family's experiencing oppression. But with the Chicano movement, that gave me a language and understanding what was happening. So my activism in a lot of ways began when I was around 15, very much tied to supporting Cesar Chavez, farm worker struggle, and also to end the war in Vietnam. I organized theater groups trying to educate our community to why we shouldn't be sending our young people to fight in Vietnam. So Chicano movement activity ultimately led to me going to Chile. I felt like I just wanted to join the revolution. It wasn't happening here strong enough, fast enough. But there they said, hey, you know what? You're an idealist, but you're very naive. If you're committed to our struggle in Chile, you go back and you figure out how you create change within the belly of the monster. It's your nation state that oppresses us. So coming back to Long Beach State, I wound up getting a job as an evening receptionist at the counseling clinic there, counseling center. And I was just impressed with how many students would come in just looking depressed, feeling depressed, and kind of leave a little bit more hopeful, leave with a little bit more sense of positive possibility. And so in a lot of ways, I said, gosh, I would love to see some of that from my community. Counseling center where people could come and actually be served in a positive way. Because at that point, 1970 more or less, no, it's 1968, yeah, it's about 1970. There weren't any mental health services, counseling service for Latino folks. So it began evolving that vision of creating a Latino counseling center. And that became very much my purpose. I looked at trying to make that happen in the greater Long Beach area, started an effort. Around that time, I was also struggling with the draft board. And in my final appeal, I got my conscientious objector status. And I proposed to them that my service would be to organize a Chicano counseling center. And they said, look, I don't know if that can be done. I said, look, I've read your regulations. I could propose a way of serving. He said, well, look, you're not going to pay. We're not going to pay you. And you've got to serve your full time. I said, well, I'll serve the full time and I'll figure a way of subsidizing my living. So ultimately that led me to go to Berkeley, Oakland. I was able to get a scholarship to graduate school social welfare, and that provides more or less a living income while I started working on organizing a counseling center at Clínica de la Raza. So I came into Oakland in 1972, very much with that perspective, that vision, and very early began to just pull together different Chicano students from UC Berkeley, Mills College, principally those two, and we began dialoguing. What would a Chicano counseling center be about? How would we serve our folks? We felt a lot of ways the dominant mental health paradigm is based upon dominant culture needs and a particular kind of framework, which was 55-minute therapeutic hour at the center with professional distance. And they said, look, if we're going to serve our folks, it's going to be about being very culturally sensitive, respectful, language sensitive, potentially home visitations, and extended therapeutic hour, team approach. So we began evolving another way of doing mental health. At the same time, we're also kind of developing just different outreach strategies to inform our own communities about what mental health counseling would be about. Because to some degree, a lot of folks felt, well, that's for gringo folks, or that's it's not appropriate for our cultura even. So during that period, we do different teatro presentations at churches, community events, and just trying to educate people to what counseling could be about in our community, and at the same time beginning to provide those services. So that was the beginnings of the counseling center. At that point, we called Centro de Salud Mental, which was part of Clínica de la Raza. And as a consequence of that program there, we had just a really strong demand for services in South County, Southern Alameda County, Hayward and South. And so at the Clínica, they said, look, we can't extend any further our boundaries. So I want to go into Hayward and work to organize another counseling center, La Familia Counseling. And so La Familia Counseling, we started in about 1976-ish, 75, 76. And again, it was to offer counseling services, therapy services for Latino folks in that area, with a strong focus and services directed to youth. And so that was a lot of my experience was in particularly area of working and developing counseling centers to serve our folks. And the word kind of spread about the good work we were doing. So I get calls, and then while I'm visiting folks in Utah, in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, to try to help them develop similar programs. So that was kind of, again, during that period.
That was a wonderful response. I think you answered that question, even the next one too. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. I'll be asking our next question. Thank you again for sharing that experience. Can you provide an example or situation during your life where you knew that you wanted to pursue mental health counseling, and how you went about developing the programs that changed how people thought about mental health?
Okay, well, as I shared, I started working I was the evening receptionist at this counseling center. And actually, once I started developing this vision of wanting to work at a place that would address kind of the needs of our Latino individuals and families, I really applied myself to learn as much about how this center operated as I could. So almost as a student evening receptionist, I started learning how to run the clinic, one. But then there were several other Chicano students there at the psychology department. So we started to develop a little bit of a team there at Long Beach State to kind of learn from each other about Chicano counseling. What might that look like? What would it be about? And in the process, then we became like the first volunteer counselors there at the University Counseling Center. So it was the experience there that kind of evolved the understanding and appreciation of the need, and then again the vision. Can we have a center that would serve our people based upon our cultural understandings? And so we addressed that by utilizing a process that we later termed raciología, knowledge of and by the people. Because a lot of times the word raza means the people, logía, study of. So in a lot of ways, we were doing raciología to kind of clarify our own methodology of how to serve our folks. Then at some point, someone said, hey, you know what? You folks are doing Pablo Freire. And we're like, oh, who's Pablo Freire? And so we learned about how he was doing popular education in Brazil and Chile, in a lot of ways engaging people to develop their own understanding of their own reality and also the solutions they needed. So that's kind of the process we evolved to kind of develop understanding of how we were going to do counseling, how we were going to do therapy, how we were going to do community education. Did that kind of hit it, or was it? And I think very important in terms of all of this, what I'm sharing so far is really coming to terms that to do good work in our community, we also have to recognize that we're about developing people's personal, family, and community power. So it's just going beyond the framework that we're here to just address problems in living or people's emotional, psychological issues. It's a combination of that and also nurturing a greater degree of self-confidence and personal belief that just grounds people on their own ability to generate their own well-being. So that just kind of just led to just different ways of doing the good work.
You have been telling us about how did you get to the Clínica de la Raza, but we were probably mistaken, thinking that you were one of the founder of the clinic. And our next question was, please tell us how La Clínica de la Raza come into being, about the discussion that inspired and shaped it, and who was involved. ¿Quiénes estaban envueltos en la creación y todo eso? Entonces,
I'd still like to respond to that in that if you're concerned about the well-being of our community, it's not just the health services, it's child development services, it's legal advocacy, it's a youth diversion programs. It's all of that. And during those early 1970s, folks like myself, young Chicanos, were going to Berkeley, and then from Berkeley jumping into Oakland, and we were developing those programs. So during that period, 68, 72, we developed at least 16 different programs. There was a Latin American library. There was the Street Academy for young people. There was Centro Infantil. There was Escuelita. There's a kind of array of services. Now, very, very much core to that was the Spanish Speaking Unity Council, Centro Legal, and Clínica de la Raza. So there was three really kind of foundational programs that are there in Oakland, and so we either collaborated with them or engaged them into developing other programs. So when I came in, Clínica was already there. It was already a storefront. And principal leaders for that program was Dr. David Hayes Bautista, Joel Garcia, and another couple other folks. So they existed already. When I came in, it was to develop a mental health service center. And at one point we're somewhat parallel to Clínica, but then ultimately we realized that it would best be all integrated. So that would be more holistic healthcare.
Nice. Because I have to, I'm sorry, but I have to tell this. Paulo Freire was one of my indirect mentor when I was working in the jungle, when I began my career as a doctor in the jungle. We share that is still are very valid. His education book, like a freedom as education of
Pedagogy of the press.
Esa práctica de la libertad.
Yeah.
Sí, muy bueno. Gracias. Charles?
So that was great. All right. So you entered La Clínica de la Raza, and without mental health services. How is it that you set it up? Who did you be? How did you count on? What kind of model did you develop? And who did you count on as being the early providers of services? Just walk us through it from the beginning. How did you make that work?
Okay, well, very fortunate that when I was Long Beach State, Joe Solis was the fieldwork consultant at the School of Social Work at UC Berkeley. And he was traveling to Southern California looking to recruit folks to graduate school of social work at Berkeley. So I met him in Long Beach, and he said, "Hey, you know what? You should consider coming to our program." At that point, actually, I was pre-med, but I was still struggling with the draft board. So ultimately, when I got drafted, you wasn't going to go, wasn't going to do the pre-med. And then at that point, I thought, okay, how in the hell am I going to just move this vision forward? And that's where Joseph Lee said, look, you know what? There's a Clínica de la Raza up here. Maybe we can work out a way by which you could work there, and we get you a scholarship from School of Social Work, so you can come here and be a student. So he was very key to help facilitating my ability to go up to Berkeley and then ultimately kind of create a placement at Clínica, which was both for my field work placement time for the graduate school, but it was also my military alternative military service time. So once there, we also at the same time brought on Ron Soto. So the both of us, Ron Soto and myself, were like a partnership, and it was one kind of picking a responsibility to do some mini grant writing to kind of get a little bit of resource. And at that point, I think we wound up getting a little bit of money from a small foundation, but they actually, I think, funded us to do kind of educational counseling around, what is community health services. I mean, it wasn't directly about counseling or mental health. It was just a little bit of seed money to pay for a couple of student interns. So again, you're seeking funds. At the same time is developing a base of support for the program. I mean, folks who could be advocates, and also folks who could look and also conceptualize how are we going to do the services. So we started, it was like the weekly Wednesday evening group, which grew to about 12 Latino students, some folks who are professional in the field, and we'd be dialoguing on, okay, how will we do services? How will we do it so we're being culturally, linguistically sensitive, responsive? So you've got one team conceptualizing how, pretty much I doing some proposal writing. And at one juncture, we got enough funds to be able to pay for a little bit of space across the street from Clínica de la Raza. It was a barbershop. So here we have this barbershop, and we kind of made it into 2 rooms, and that became our first counseling center, was across the street. So, and at that point, we want to pick up a couple of clients. And so, we're just, it's totally storefront. Some service, a lot of conceptualizing of ideally what we want to create. And during that period, there's some funding source came up, which was federal dollars through county revenue sharing funds. And we were able to put forward to the county a proposal to do counseling services, and noting to Alameda County that they didn't have any Spanish-speaking counseling services, whatever within their system. So at the time, I think they were pretty relieved that, okay, these folks are willing to do this for very, very cheap, is provide some counseling services. So we got enough funds there to pull together a core program. So initially, maybe the staff was about 5-6 folks. And it was a big challenge at that point to find someone who had any professional licensure, because again, 1972, there's next to nil Latinos that have any licensure, whether it be clinical social work, psychologists, psychiatrists. However, we did find Carmen Carrillo, Dr. Carmen Carrillo, who was at Counselor Mills College, who was just on the threshold of getting her licensure. So we hired her as a psychologist. We were able to, well, actually, there was a Dr. Samuel Martinez, who was originally from Colombia, a physician psychiatrist there, and he's here in the States, and he doesn't have legal paperwork to be a therapist here, but he has all that talent, so enlisted him. And so initially that staff, we pulled together the best folks we could find, who were folks who are highly committed, but maybe not yet fully licensed to be serving. And it took us a little while before we could actually fully address all licensure, requirements.
Wow.
And these are all paid staff members.
At this point, well, not everyone. We had a core paid staff, and we're not paying we're not top dollar fees. We're not even paying just low level fees. It was minimal. It was folks who are committed to serving community, committed to mental health, and so we were able to negotiate some degree of payment, but it wasn't like a very strong paying professional position.
That's great. And now in La Clinica, you have psychiatrists, you have pretty much a full services program. How did you make that salto? How did you were able to build up to that level?
Okay, well, now I was there as a director of Centro de Salud Mental from 72 to 78. So I have not been part of that program since 1978. So I don't know all of its evolution. However, during the time I was there, we were eventually, well, at one point we had a Dr. David Richmond, who was a gringo. Well, he was a psychologist, but he was very much into learning about biofeedback, and he was willing to work for next to nothing to kind of experiment with his therapeutic process of using biofeedback techniques. And then subsequently, we were able to get psychiatrist time from Dr. Arnaldo Solis, who was also the part-time psychiatrist at Mission Neighborhood Health Center. So the few that were around, they made themselves as accessible as possible. Like Dr. Solis knew that we needed psychiatry time in our center, and so he was willing to work with us. So again, at these early years, you have a lot of folks that are very committed to accessing services and then make the personal sacrifices to try to help make that happen.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Nancy, you wanted to number 9?
Yeah, of course. So you shared many foundational decision makings in the beginnings. So do you have any major recall during all this time of how to get it up from the beginnings to then as you're working as a director?
Well, again, all this is happening during the period of very much the Chicano struggle. I mean, a lot of us grew up, our parents were working class farm workers or just laborers. They're struggling. We wanted to honor them by creating a positive difference within our community. So I've got to impress upon you that back then it was like, this was our lifestyle. Our lifestyle was to create these community organizations and programs and serve. Now, my role in a lot of ways was a hold of a vision, because it was like, okay, we can develop a program that's based upon our cultural reality, and we can make it happen. So in a lot of ways, a number of other folks there held other visions in terms of, we can have a child development center. We can have a legal aid center. So it's carrying the vision and then inspiring people around that vision in terms of making it happen. So that played a big part of it. And then I was very fortunate that I had developed some basic organizing facilitation skills. I didn't have the words for them, but and I really didn't recognize this till the Carter administration. During the Carter administration, I received a national appointment to go back to DC to be an advisor on minority mental health issues for the nation. And then after, and I would have to go back to DC for about 3-4 days every 6 weeks. So I'm going back to DC, and here, youngest person, probably the lowest degree person on this advisory team. However, here having an opportunity to kind of provide input in terms of policies practices for serving minority folks. So anyways, at one point, one of the undersecretaries approached me and said, hey, you know what? Are you a Baptist or Methodist? And I'm like, whoa, I mean, like, one, he's talking to me, just acknowledging me. But the other part of me was, how did you know? Because, my background was in the Methodist Church. So we got into a little bit of a dialogue, and he said, well, look, I've been back in DC for a number of years, and I see very few Hispanics back here. And when I do see some, I usually identify that they develop their talents in oftentimes a church. And I said, well, yeah, but you didn't mention Catholic Church. He goes, yeah, I know, but they're pretty hierarchical, and they don't nurture, grassroots organizing skills, which it happens within the Baptist Church and to another degree, the Methodist Church. So that's where I got in touch with how much leadership development I developed vis-a-vis my church experience and my Boy Scout experience. Between those two, I learned how to do planning, facilitate meetings, bring people together. So in a lot of ways, since that period, I very much committed myself to leadership development. Well, actually, when I left the Clínica Centro, part of my ongoing work has been leadership development, and in the last number of years, very much leadership coaching, kind of addressing that notion of what kind of leadership skills and talents do we need to both build, develop, and execute on our programs.
Great. You begin to tell us some memorable experience about your beginning. That things with the person who asked you about what church you belong to is very interesting. Do you have another experience, bad and good, anecdotic, that you wanted to share with us in this moment about, being young, like you said, and be part of a new institution, improving, that part of mental health? It's really amazing. Or those times that you were living in 78, a lot of movement. And I wanted to know if you have some experience, obstacles or anecdotic like this that you just said to us.
Okay. Well, here, in terms of this work that we're doing, at one level, you're learning from the experience. Every client you have teaches you more about the realities our communities are struggling with. And because, I said part of our approach was home visitation. Like, I remember that we got a referral from Highland Hospital about this woman who they felt was psychotic. She was just kind of having all these hallucinations about, just almost like not being attacked in her home, but somebody kind of in her home all the time. And so home visitation, we saw where she lived in West Oakland. It was just the tiniest home, but there are rats all over the place. I mean, there's rats in the cupboards and making noise. I mean, so here the white therapist at Highland saying someone's psychotic, but they were just living a very real reality where they were just just that feeling of being invaded all the time when you've got rodents, in your house. I mean, it's very basic, but it's something that a lot of folks don't understand unless you really kind of step into other people's reality. So again, just a lot of times miracles happening in terms of family wellness when you go to someone's home to do therapy, and now you're involving the tia and the grandfather that's there, incorporating them into that whole healing process. So the approach we developed in home visitation, taught us so much more, opened up the opportunities for us to actually be more effective healer change agents. And then at the same time, we're also saying, look, we also come from a cultural background that's indigenous. Let's also draw from that indigenous tradition. So what I would do in the side would bring together different curandero type of people, different kind of healer folks in terms of, okay, what can we learn from each other that we could utilize in our therapy work? So kind of learning a little bit more about just how to integrate ceremony practices. And some of this didn't really kind of go into fuller fruition until I developed the second mental health program, La Familia. There was a little bit more openness and flexibility to kind of incorporate some of our cultural traditions. But this was the track we were on, was learning how to draw from our cultural wisdom. So I also began engaging more in indigenous practice, the temazcal or the sweat lodge, and using that for healing. And tell you the truth, some of my greatest insights around the work we did, came to me out of the temazcal experience, out of the sweat lodge experience. So it's not what you're taught in the institution about doing therapy, as much as engaging in the process of creating healing and therapy, and then also creating sacred time so that, hey, get a little bit of divine guidance to help us clarify just better ways of working with our folks.
Good. And I wanted also to asking you again, what is this reality? Can you give us an example of you said the family living reality, and what did you mean by that reality?
Well,
sorry, and all of these questions, it's like people who wanted to learn from you, student. When you say reality, there are a lot of realities around, and I wanted you to define or give us an example of this.
Okay, well, the prior illustration I think I provided was that oftentimes dominant culture therapists cannot appreciate the stresses and strains in living under very minimalist living conditions, where you have 3 or 4 or 5 people living in a 1-bedroom house, or living with rats in the kitchen counters, or living in a situation where the floors are flooded every time it rains. They don't know what it is to live in that kind of poor working class reality. And so as a therapist, someone goes to their clinic and talks about their reality, they're not fully appreciating the full struggle of it, because they don't have either the class experience or the cultural experience to appreciate that.
Thank you very much. That give us a real example.
That's fascinating. I've learned so much. Tell me, do you have any particular stories or experiences that highlight the impact of these programs that you created on particular individuals or families? Something that really stands out for you amongst all those years of work?
Well, what comes mostly to mind just is how the work we did there at Centro Salud Mental, again, part of Clínica de la Raza, also now in conjunction with La Familia in Hayward, was develop a program called Hijos del Sol, Children of the Sun, Hijos del Sol, which was directed to, is a kind of support program for Chicano children and then for young people. Now, to a number of those young people who went through that program have now become tremendous community leaders because of what the program did for them. Case example, and I think he'd be okay me sharing this, is Aron Ortiz, who is CEO of La Familia. Okay, when we started La Familia, again, it was a concept and a grassroots program, and now it's close to a $50 million operation in 4 counties, and much to the credit of Aron. Aron was a youngster who was already getting into street trouble. He was up to kind of do time in a juvenile delinquency facility when kind of Hijos kind of saved him from that path. that the program engaged him in such a way where he saw other possibilities for his life, providing him opportunities to connect with other young people who were motivated to make a difference, to become better. And consequently, he says, hey, you know what? A lot of ways the program saved my life. So I've heard that story from a number of young folks from that period where, you know, there wasn't anything else available that was affirming, validating their ability to grow up to be successful, community-serving folks. And Hijos del Sol did that for a number of young men and young women. I mean, that one's one that comes to mind.
Great, thank you so much.
Nancy,
Okay.
reflecting.
Yeah, so for our next question is, since your involvement in mental health programs, how have you seen the progression in the improvement of mental health for our community?
Okay, well, here, to tell you the truth, like I said, I was a director there at the Centro from 72 to 78. And then I was also chair of the board La Familia probably till in the early 80s. And at that point, I pretty much left mental health because it was becoming more confining, where there was more regulations in terms of the requirements for different licensures. There was more requirements around a unit of service. It was getting more difficult to do our extended therapeutic hour, and I found it actually difficult to sometimes to work within that construct of therapy, dominant culture therapy. So I'm more so moved to engage in one it's facilitating or helping almost family facilitators learn how to create greater health and well-being within their own families, their own personal families, and the families of their networks. Here, let me get something might help me illustrate what I'm trying to talk about. Let's look. Okay. Here, during the time, I think I told you I was with the Clinica. At the same time, I'm going around trying to help other folks around the Southwest develop similar programs. After a while, you know, I was burnt out, and I just, you know, because like what am I? I'm 24, 25, director of a center, and then travel around helping others develop other similar programs. So anyways, I felt I needed to go back home to kind of connect with my source of power to re-nurture myself. I went back to my home and then found that my own family was in a very distressed state. One of my brothers had come out being gay. Another brother just was totally upset about it. My parents didn't know what to do about it, and no one's talking about it. So here I go back to for my family experience to re-nurture my spirit and ability to organize, and I encountered this. And then I came to terms with, here I am traveling around the country helping other families, communities, and what am I doing for my own family? So what came to mind is, you know what, I've learned all these skills as a therapist, as an organizer. Let me begin to apply them within my own family. So I began doing the one-to-one conocimientos, and just enlist different folks in the family to, let's come together for a family gathering. And so subsequently, that's what we did. We began having a series of family intercambios, where it took a while because the first gathering we had, the two brothers that they were most antagonistic didn't show up, even though they committed themselves to. However, the rest of the family did. And out of that process, we got in touch with how my mom felt guilt because she had prayed for a daughter, and look what happened to her son. my dad, it's like, look, you know what? Unfortunately, your brother's sick. The only thing we do is pray for him. And then he was confronted by my youngest brother, who my dad sees as a really he-man type of guy. And he told my dad, you know what? I respect Jack because he's truthful to who he is. He's a truthful man. And my dad said, how can you say he's a truthful man? Because that's who he is. But anyways, we opened up the wound, and it took a period of time, but we finally got to a point where we were able to actually have family retreats where my brother was able to bring his partner. And so given that experience, I was teaching community organizing at Berkeley, school of social work at this point, and I began to make that a requirement that students organize a family meeting and to develop their family health plan. And initially they're like, hey, you know what? We're not here to deal with family. We're here to organize community. And so look, if you're committed to a better community, then you've got to learn how to work with also families. And back at that time, I'd ask people, how many people here have ever had a family meeting? And group of 12 to 20, and invariably maybe there'd be one or two at most. So I began working on developing kind of tools to help families help themselves. Because invariably in every family, there's one or two people who naturally kind of bring folks together. They're a lot of times a family facilitator, but they don't have a word to even name themselves. So subsequently, all that work led to me writing this book on family activism. How do you create change in the world, beginning with family and friends? So it's a whole idea of how we, as the oldest son, the youngest son, the parent, can learn how to actually facilitate family gatherings, where you facilitate family conocimiento, family connection, trust, and then learn how to do family problem solving. So in a lot of ways, I've stepped out of dominant mental health paradigm work to more so do this more community activism work that also is healing work. Because just yesterday, I did a training for 30 activist leaders of the 3-county area here, and it was more so learning the process of co-powerment. A lot of times organizations talk about empowerment, and they're committed to empowerment, but if you look at the root definition of empowerment, it's a granting of power by decree. It came out of the 15th century in terms of the churches or the church and kingdoms actually empowering subjects, vassals to do in behalf of the church or the kingdom. But I'm talking about what we're doing then is looking at co-powerment. How do we interact in such a way where we connect with our personal power, aid this other person develop in connecting with their power, and then lift each other up? Co-powerment. So it's languaging, it's approaches that, going back again a number of years, just wasn't in the realm of mental health. So I decided to do this outside of mental health. I decided to do this as an organizational development consultant, as a leadership coach, as a community activist, as a parent educator. I found other frameworks to kind of share the teachings I had, because it was too difficult to do it within mental health. And as a consequence, I have not engaged very much with mental health people since.
That's amazing. I can tell you, as a Latina, coming from working family and being Latina, I identify what you said, not in the same example, but always we had to, as a professional, as a one that goes to the university, had to confront issues in the family, and sometimes we are the facilitators and sometimes the therapists, even when we are not prepared for any of those roles.
Exactly, and that goes back to nurturing culture, health, and well-being, is to validate that within all our family systems, invariably there's one or two people who has a knack ability to bring family together. So now I say, you know what? You're the family facilitator. So what does that mean? Well, facilitate means to make easy. Your job is to make easy the communication and healing that your family needs. Well, how can I do that? Well, let's look at it. But invariably now, parents and others in the family just learn some basic skills that, well, they learn to strengthen the essential skills and talents they already have, and actually become more of a resource for family wellness, healing, planning. Yeah.
Yeah. Besides your experience with you say ayahuasca, or sorry,
Pardon?
you say this the Indian. Sorry, my memory. I think I had to consult someone. You at the beginning you said that you use some therapeutic indigenous method.
Well, we're using more indigenous-based understandings to facilitate healing.
Yeah, but in your website, this is the number 17 for my colleague here in the interview. You say on your website, we gathered the idea of you as a firm believer in the value of family and spirituality to help overcome and prevent mental health problems. Could you tell us about this orientation and how it affects your work now? But I wanted you have been talking about what is the, with this wonderful example of you being facilitator of your family. How the spirituality, and I'm talking about in general, the spirituality with the Baptist church and with the indigenous, how this helped to create this family therapeutic facilitator.
Okay, well, here, I'm going to respond with some just different.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, again, part of my experience growing up was, like I said, it was in a Chicano or a Latino Methodist church. So and they're very much like the Blackist Baptist churches. I mean, here, our trustees of our church may not have been educated, but that here we're running our own church. So in a way that develops leadership talents and skills, because you could see yourself creating institutions, running your institution. And Methodists, they tend to be methodological. There's methods to all of what you do. So I learned about thinking logically about methods, learned a little bit of organizing, and learned that we could do institutional building. But then that's not my spirituality in terms of my spirit practice. My spirit practice is acknowledging that as life, we're all interconnected. That all of us, our essential spirit is por vida, por vida. Our essential spirit is for life, love, and evolutionary change. We are all human spirits on Mother Earth to learn how to mature our spirit. So we're here to learn how to become actually more loving, more purposeful. That's our human purpose. But we're all disconnected around that. So my spirit path is about connecting with our spirit essence, our por vida essence. It's about actually, you familiar with Tai Chi? Well, there's Olin Chi, which is indigenous Tai Chi, which we're about taking that por vida energy in the universe, draw it into our person through all our energy chakras, expanding our cerebral intelligence, our heart intelligence, by mindful breathing and nurturing our spirit. You don't need a Bible, you don't need a church institution. You need to just be open to acknowledging that your essence is spirit. And how do I nurture my spirit? You can nurture your spirit by how you breathe, how you think, how you feel, how you interact. You can nurture your spirit by living love. And I'm not talking about the boxes that our dominant culture puts love in terms of romance, Valentine's, all of that. But love is that inherent energy within us that yearns to be kindness, service, giving, connection. Our inherent essence is love. So right now, I do mental health work, spirit work, by teaching people about radical love, teaching them about por vida living, teaching them how to do breath and movement to nurture their health and well-being and their connection to their spirit and to their heart. I do this sometimes by drawing on different indigenous practices to create sacred time. like I said, this weekend, I've been doing training for activists around the county, and we begin with an indigenous practice, burning of sage, create sacred time, invite everyone to be just more fully present with their physical body and their spirit. So just beginning to acknowledge that kind of opens people up to, wow, I'm spirit. Wow, that's sort of cool. And I want to get to know me more. So that, and talking this way now and teaching this way, I really had to create distance from the dominant practices of health and public health, because it limited me so much, because I'm trying to be professional within their context, and invariably then I was not speaking to what is I feel is at the core of healing practices.
Well, this, I think all of us are thinking in make an appointment with you. This sounds really cool.
Well, I do. Well, part of my work is leadership coaching. So I do coaching for different organizational leaders from around the country. And then after a while, I wound up doing a Tuesday noon session a session every Tuesday noon for Puerto Vida movement. Just engage people in these movements to kind of ground their energy and expand their heart consciousness. And so I'm still doing it for just like conocidos and friends. Like Joel Garcia, he participates, on a weekly basis. And so if you're interested, check it out, then let me know and I'll send you a link.
That's so cool. Before the other question, I wanted to say that we as a member of the project, and in the near future, we haven't have all the means, the days and everything, but we will be showing you an invitation to be personally here in Berkeley for you and Joel and all the members of La Clínica to talk with the student and professor here. And we will love that so much, and you and your group will be an incredible experience for all the people who participate. But we will tell you that.
Well, we can explore at the appropriate time. Again, like I say, my doctor's in public health. I have not been affiliated with the school because, again, of just the struggles that I experience on just the dominant paradigm and what they want to hear. And I find we'd have too little time. Global warming is real. Global warming is so real. We're up against a time reality where this decade 2020, we've got to learn how to create 1 billion miracles a day of transformative change if our children are going to have a future to live in. I mean, that's real. And so I find most public health folks, they don't want to hear that. They'd rather be more myopic and look at, present time policies, practices, and ignore the big picture. So I look for opportunities where people either want to explore radical love, or to be the living, healing, proactive leadership. I mean, to me, that's worth my time.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we mean. What I mean, because I, as a public health specialist too, I have issues with this practice of public health, and I think there is room here for overall for the new student. We have an important task to make them see another venues of practicing public health without being in a box. And
Great.
I think in that regard, this will be key. Will be amazing to show. But I wanted to continue with the questionnaire.
Okay. How are you doing, Charles?
You know the dynamic already.
You certainly fit well within the within the Allende frame of public health in Latin America, liberal public health. I teach in a public health school in Latin America, not around.
Oh, great.
I've got one last question for you, which is, What questions should we have asked that we didn't? What else did we forget that you would like to say that might really give us some insight into the amazing work that you've done?
Well, here, I tell you what I liked in terms of what you did, particular, Charles, is you said, tell me about you. Tell me about who you are. And also, I think, is who you are and what you do and why do you do it. That's an important part, because it kind of opens up the door to potentially kind of get into the sharing that we ultimately got to. I didn't know that I had the opportunity to kind of step into a little bit about sharing about Por Vida Living, Por Vida Leadership. But it occurred because there was enough conocimiento happening here. And for me, that whole concept conocimiento, that practice is just one of the greatest tools we have for healing. That idea that before you engage in a healing relationship, you need to create conocimiento, a mutual awareness of each other, where nos conocemos. What are you about? What am I about? What's your commitment? What's my commitment? And evolve a greater degree of just connection, trust. And then with that opens up, more ability to kind of just get candid and talk about all of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I love that, whether it was formal, informal, we began with some conocimiento. That was important. Truthfully, I was being available because I have a lot of respect for Joel, and Joel said, look, you're gonna get a call, I'd like you to participate in this interview. But part of me was just resisting, because I thought, oh, gosh, this is probably one of those other policy related interviews. And so I didn't know that in a lot of ways, you folks were, look, we're doing exploration. We're maybe open to different ways by which healing can happen and what we might support. I think if I would have known that, I kind of potentially would have been more prepared. In that case, what I would have done, I would have maybe started our session by a little bit of a sage burning. I mean, right behind me, in terms of the number of my clients, we begin our Zoom gathering with a burning of sage. You burn white sage, you say, you know what, this is sacred time. It's so special that we want to be engaging with our truth, and we invite the spirits to be with us. So oftentimes that's how I like to work. But again, if that could potentially have happened if I would have had more insight before the interview about what this was about. Plus, I thought it was just going to be like a one-person interview on the phone, or if it was Zoom, I didn't know we were going to have a team here. More the reason to have created more a space that actually make this a sacred circle. Those are some just thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah. Nancy, do you have some final question?
I don't have anything to add, but I just like to thank you for your time and for you to share your story. And again, like Clara said, with the invitation of, we hope to have a guest speaker panel with you and other founders of Latinica and other leaders in health and in all you do, and to share this experience with the students and with anyone who's willing to listen and be able to take that into consideration within and take it back to their community. It's very important. So thank you.
Well, here, thank you all for your good work. And yeah, I think ideally, if we could have started like this, it would have been beautiful. That's more the indigenous tradition, is let's get to know who we are before we engage in the sharing. But I ultimately did do it. So les doy gracias a todos. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to run right now.
Thank you so much.
Blessings to all of you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye-bye.